The Persian army numbered nearly 500,000 men, but was beaten by a Mongol army less than half that size. The governors of outlying cities were executed by pouring molten silver into their eyes and throats. The capital city of Samarkand, which was expected to withstand our siege for a full year, fell in 5 days. Separate mountains were made of the skulls of men, women, children, horses, dogs, and cats. We roamed the streets in wonder at the opulence of the Persians, drinking at their fountains and gorging ourselves on sherbet and tropical fruit. For a man born in a tent, it seemed as if Genghis Khan had torn open the gates to heaven itself. Russia and Mesopotamia were now ours to command. The empire now stretched over 7,000 miles, from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea. We were about to enter Europe when tragedy struck. Old wolves do not die gracefully. Warriors their whole lives, they do not know how to live when they grow old and their fangs fall out. Such it is with Mongols as well. Genghis Khan was now 80 years old. On the night when we knew our glorious conquest was about to end, Genghis summoned his sons to his tent. They found their father shivering before a fire, delirious with pain. "My descendants will wear gold," he said. "They will eat the finest meals and ride the finest horses, and forget to whom they owe it all. A deed is not glorious until it is finished." And he refused to die until Ogedai, his third son, promised to continue the war. Ogedai emerged from the tent, carrying his father's bow, and declared, "This storm is not yet finished. I hear the sound of lightning, and it strikes in Poland." The church bells rang in Europe when they saw our hordes pouring out of the mountains. The armies of Bohemia and Germany hastened to Poland's defense. To them, our army might have been from the underworld itself, still commanded by the shade of the great Khan. European knights fight as individuals, but Mongols fight as part of a united army. Laden down with armor, the Polish and Germans could not catch our quick-footed horses. Time and again, we fired flaming arrows at them, then retreated out of range. When the enemy cavalry pursued, we would lead them into an ambush. The ambush was always announced by the nakara, a huge drum carried into battle on a camel. 100 times 100 times has the nakara sounded on this day. We were ordered to cut off an ear of every victim. 9 large sacks of ears were sent back to Ogedai Khan. Only one power stands in our way. France and the kingdoms beyond are beaten from decades of crusades. If we break Eastern Europe, then it is likely that all of Western Europe will surrender. But to break the East, we must defeat Hungary. Hungary possesses the most formidable cavalry in all of Europe. They have not only the strength of European armor, but their horses are cousins to our own, having drifted in from across the Russian steppes. The Saho River that separates us from the army of Hungary is frozen, so we will be unable to deploy boats. Instead, the battle will be won or lost over who controls the bridge. Subotai is coming with reinforcements. If we can survive the charge of the Hungarian knights until Subotai arrives, then we can hope to take the bridge. Much rests on this simple bridge. If we capture the Saho crossing, we capture Hungary. If Hungary falls, so falls Europe. With Europe and Asia under Mongol control, our conquest of the world will be complete and final. Nothing stands between us and the Atlantic Ocean. The Mongol Empire comprises 2 whole continents. Europe and Asia belong to the hordes. Every place we have entered has changed forever with our passing. Russia, once filled with quarreling city-states, much like the old Mongol tribes, will forever be melded into a single gigantic empire. Genghis Khan forged the largest empire ever created in the life of one man. His body was carried back to the river Onon, where the legendary blue wolf and fallow doe once lived. He was buried in the ground, and 1,000 horsemen rode over the site to disguise it. Genghis Khan's final resting place was devoured by the steppes. My people cherish the legend that their great ruler will one day return to lead his horsemen to another bloody victory.
Long ago, a great and wise sage climbed the holy peak of Mount Abu. He sought the favor of the gods to protect the people of the earth. But he was descended upon by Rakshas, man-eating demons with flame-red eyes and fangs like steel. But though the demons neared, the sage was as immovable as the mountain itself. Though he felt the heat of the demon's breath on his bare shoulder, the sage was resolute, making the offering of fire to the gods and asking for their protection. From the flames of his offering spawned the Rajput clans, born of fire and smoke. Their heroes fought the Rakshas, but though much blood was shed, the demon menace continued to darken Mount Abu. The sage dug a new fire pit deeper into the mountain earth, and again made the offering. From this pit came Johan, weapons in his forearms. He slew the Rakshas, and from his loins came the mightiest of the Rajput clans. From this clan came my king. I am Chand Bardai, poet of the Raja's court. I will tell you the story of a great king. But this story, much like life itself, must start from the beginning. My king, Prithviraj, was not always a great Raja. Once he was a young king of Ajmer, challenged by his own cousin for rule of the Johan clan. In those days, the Rajput clans raided and warred with one another. There were Kshatriya, warriors from birth. A young Rajput like Prithviraj was headstrong and brave, but to be a wise king would take more than courage. From his minister Taimbasa, Prithviraj learned wisdom and how to rule, but the spirit of the Kshatriya would never leave him. My Raja longed for new victories and lands to conquer. Rajasthan is a harsh land, a desolate desert snaked by the winding fingers of the Ganga river. The Rajput clans who rule here are as tough as the desert soil and as passionate and unpredictable as the rivers flow. The name Rajasthan means the land of the kings. And from this land come India's greatest warriors and Rajas. A king named Jayachandra ruled the strongest of the clans. His experience and might was surpassed only by his bitter anger and ambition. He sought to rule all of Rajasthan. In keeping with the ancient traditions, Jayachandra ordered a ritual signifying his authority. A mare was released into Rajasthan and pursued by the king's warriors. Wherever the horse went, the ruler of that land would either accept Jayachandra's authority or challenge it by fighting the warriors. As Prithviraj hunted tigers in the forest, he discovered how quickly the hunter could himself become the hunted. All of India heard tales of Prithviraj's Digvijaya, his conquest of all directions. The Rajput princes submitted to him, and word of his victories spread far. Princes came from all lands to congratulate the young Raja. But far greater than any princely gift was the love of a princess. In Kannauj, in the very court of his rival Jayachandra, Prithviraj caught the eye of Sanyugita, a headstrong Rajput princess with bewitching beauty. The young king fell in love with Jayachandra's own daughter. My king was in love with Sanyugita. The two would sneak away from their courts to meet in border towns and wooded groves, where they would embrace under the bright light of the moon. But for all their secrecy, the romance could not be hidden from the powerful Jayachandra and his army of spies. The mighty king would never approve of his daughter marrying his own rival. Instead, he ordered a Swayamvara, a ceremony where Sanyogita would choose her husband from the men invited by her father. Jayachandra invited all the princes and kings of India to the ceremony except for one. Almost one. In mockery of Prithviraj, Jayachandra had a clay statue made in the young king's image to serve as the doorman to his court. Sanyogita was as headstrong as she was beautiful. With the infinite courage of a Rajput princess, she walked through the royal court carrying the ceremonial garland and ignoring the expectant gazes of her suitors. Coming to the door, she defiantly laid the garland around the neck of the clay statue of Prithviraj, declaring him her husband. To her surprise, the young Raja had braved the dangers of his rival's kingdom to slip into the ceremony. Emerging from behind the statue, Prithviraj embraced Sanyogita. The two rode to Ajmer as the furious Jayachandra vowed that his revenge would be felt to the ends of the earth. Without his daughter, Jayachandra became a stampeding elephant. No one was safe from his overflowing rage. But anger alone could not win a war, and Jayachandra would not have been a threat to my Raja had it not been for the jealousy and cunning of a once loyal subject. Oh, Kaimbasa! How love and jealousy made him betray his master. The minister who had advised my king since he was a boy, and whom Prithviraj honored like a beloved uncle, sought the one woman he could not have. Kaimbasa fell in love with Sanyogita. His jealousy drove him to Jayachandra's court to betray his own king. Whispering in Jayachandra's ear, Kaimbasa gave direction and purpose to the king's anger. He urged Jayachandra to send an ambassador to the Afghan hills to find Muhammad Ghori, a brutal warlord said to command a slave army numbering in the thousands. The messenger would regale the Turk with tales of the riches of Prithviraj's kingdom and whisper to him how the young king was too smitten with his bride to defend his lands. Then Kaimbasa promised the vengeful king Prithviraj would be defeated and Jayachandra would rule Rajasthan. Unknown to the two men, their fateful scheme would jeopardize all of India. Thousands of Turkish horsemen, the slave soldiers of a savage warlord, descended from the Afghan hills to the plain at Tarain. Great clouds of dust rose in their wake, obstructing the vision of the Rajput Kshatriya. The Turkish cavalry unleashed a shower of arrows on the Rajputs. The Indian warriors, facing an enemy they could not see, could only weather the blows against them. With the battle hanging in the balance, Govind Rai, brother of my king, rode alone into the dusty fray, challenging the Turkish warlord to single combat. He struck Muhammad Ghori from his horse and wounded him. The warlord's slaves encircled their master and carried him off the field as the Turkish trumpets beleaguered a retreat. Prithviraj's victory over Muhammad Ghori proved to be a curse. Believing that the Turk would not return, my Raja took to revelry and the company of Sanyogita, leaving the defenses to rot. It is here that I, Chand Bardai, enter the story and make my mark in my king's legend. I warned my Raja that nothing would stop the Turk. The warlord had come down from the barren Afghan mountains to gaze upon the wealth of India and would return with a larger army. My Raja was wise and he listened to me. He sent messengers to the other Rajput princes, calling them to war, but few listened. Laughing, the princes told the messengers that surely the Turks would not return so soon after being blooded by Rajput Kshatriya. The princes of Rajasthan sent only token forces to aid my Raja's defense. As my king marched once again to war, I feared that he would not return. I began to write this tale and shared it with the other poets. Even if my king did not survive the battle, his legend would live on throughout all of India. I would make sure of it. Prithviraj's heroism could not overcome his delay. he was defeated and taken to the Turkish warlord's castle in the Afghan mountains. There, my king was cruelly blinded and imprisoned. I followed my Raja in his captivity. When I came to the Turkish court, I regaled the warlord with the same tales and feats that I have told you. Surely I persuaded him. A generous warlord would treat such a heroic Raja as a companion and vassal, not as a prisoner condemned to a sullen dungeon. But Muhammad's heart was cruel, and though he brought my Raja from his prison, he mocked Prithviraj for his blindness. In ridicule, he threw a bow and a single arrow at my Raja's feet and dared him to strike at him. Prithviraj drew the bow. Though he could not see, the sound of the Turk's sneering laughter made his aim true. He released the arrow, striking Muhammad Gori. The guards fell upon Prithviraj and slew him. In Ajmer, Sanyogita was stricken with grief. So strong was her love that she could not bear to live another day without her Prithviraj. In honor of her husband and defiant to the end, she took her life by throwing herself into a fire. Thus, my story ends where it began, with a legend born of fire.
1538 AD, year 8 of the reign of King Tabinshweti. Over 2 decades ago, an old village shaman came to our little mountain kingdom of Tungu. He claimed to speak with the Nats, the ancestral spirits worshipped by our people before the coming of Buddhism. The Nats had told the shaman that an ancient warrior prince would be reincarnated in our kingdom. This prince would rule as the Shakavati, the universal ruler embodying Buddhist virtue. Soon after, the king had a son named Tabinshweti. At the same time, a servant girl also had a son, and she was made the newborn prince's wet nurse. I know this story well, as I am the son of that servant girl and was raised alongside my future king. Thus the Nats joined the fates of a king and a servant. My mother is not so sure Tabinshweti is who the Nats spoke of. She says the Nats are tricky spirits who mislead with their blessings. But I tell my mother I am no prince. Only King Tabinshweti can lead our small kingdom against our enemies. And our enemies are many. Our lands are under attack by the Shan, a warrior people from the far north. Our walls cannot stop them, so we attack south to gain a stronger foothold in Hantawadi. The Nats bring fear into the heart of the Hantawadi king. He flees to his allies, just as a frightened buffalo runs to his herd after smelling a tiger. The king and I are the Burmese tigers chasing after that buffalo. To reward my service in battle, my king bestowed a name of great honor upon me, Bainyang, which means king's elder brother, though he is a king, and I am but the son of a servant girl. He embraced me and declared a shared blood. I am no longer a simple servant. I am Bainyang. I am a prince.